understanding research results, evaluating explanations and conclusion. Dear students, while dealing with verbal data, we need to be quite careful in order to bring in credibility to our data. And that is achieved while explaining the conclusions and the justifications which are done on the basis of verbal data, right? Verbal data, since it is the qualitative aspect of the study, is made credible with various strategies and using various tactics. And in this session, we are going to talk about those measures which are carried out in order to make verbal data more credible, right? Because this credibility is really important for verbal data. And we as researchers, we must be able to increase credibility and by using these steps and tactics. When we are explaining and we are concluding from our data, we need to be making sure that we are going very meticulously and we are following various steps which are required for using and concluding from verbal data, right? So this checking for quality is really important. We must be coming up with something which is really believable. And this believability is, particularly for verbal data, is achieved through various tactics and strategies, right? So there are 7 most common tactics which are used for, making verbal data more reliable and, more convincing, okay? So the step 1 is that we must be able to point out any spurious relationship if it is there, okay? And this tactic, this point means that our data is not misleading, right? We are, particularly while dealing with verbal data, we are coming up with a conclusion which is based on authentic justifications, okay? And this point further means that we are showing on the basis of the data a very convincing relationship between the two constructs, okay? So whatever is, for example, a change taking place in the dependent variable is basically just only and only because of the manipulation of independent variable, right? So these two constructs, they are directly related and there is nothing in between, right? So there is no misleading element in the data, right? So that's the point 1, that the convincing, or the justifiable evidence is provided in order to show that the direct relationship between the constructs exists, okay? And then we have another strategy, that how can we enhance the credibility of verbal data if we use this, test or strategy, which is called the if-then test, okay? The if-then strategy, right? So this is, the condition that if this happens, what would be then the situation, okay? So if the hypothesis proves correct, okay, it proves true, then this would be the situation, okay? So this if-then test is another strategy or another tactic which is used for enhancing the, the quality of verbal data, right? So number first, that you were reducing the misleading information. Number 2, this one, that you were using a strategy that if then, so if this is the situation, then what would be the, the effect? So this cause and effect sort of condition is provided with the basis of that verbal data. Then we have some rival explanations, okay? So if this was the situation, then what other possibilities were there? Okay, so possibility number 1, but what other possibilities were there? So possibility number 2, possibility number 3, right? And particularly this is important for cause and effect sort of situation, that when one cause is there, okay, so what are the effects? Effect number 1, effect number 2, or effect number 3. So this is a strategy which is called rival explanations. So that rival explanations are provided, and that's important because that would provide weight to the theoretical conclusion. When you are concluding something from your verbal data, right, and you are, coming up with one conclusion, what other conclusions would be there? What are other possibilities? So that, discussion on rival explanations would enhance the credibility of verbal data. Then another strategy is, and which is not only limited to qualitative studies, but that is also applicable to quantitative studies. If you replicate the findings, okay, so you were replicating it in order to enhance the credibility that if this was the study and this is my findings, okay, so if I replicate this, and as a researcher you should replicate this. So when you are replicating something and you are making it the part of your report, you are reporting that replication, then that would bring in quite convincing and credible information to your study. Okay, so that's an excellent way to support your hypothesis that you have replicated something. So it's twice proved, right? And if you are replicating twice, then it is thrice proved, right? So nothing is, deniable then in it. Okay, so that's another excellent way to support your hypothesis, right? And then the informant feedback is really important, right? When you are concluding from your verbal data, right, and you're done with your conclusion, now you want to discuss it with your informants, okay, your respondents from where you collected your data, and you informally discuss the conclusion with them, okay? So you would know their feedback, and you would, of course, come up with something which is solid. So you would be informally supporting your formal discussion, your formal data results, okay? So that's another strategy which is used. And another point is that with verbal data, we as researchers must be coming up with rich and thick description. So rich, we are covering every aspect of the data. So nothing is left unanswered, okay? So that's the thick data, the rich data which is there. So it's not surface data, or it's not, the surface level truth is not presented, but a very detailed, very rich information is given, and that is called rich and thick description. The last point, in order to make your verbal data authentic and credible, is if you go for a third-party audit. And it's a bit expensive, because when you want to come up with an audit, because there are some people who can provide you with some services, and particularly for large-scale research studies, the audit possibility is there, that you can provide the audit of your study. And that audit is not done by you, but you hire someone who's the expert of the field. So you hire that person, the person go and check your steps and revisit, replicate that, and come up with something which is really solid, right? So that is the audit, which is called external audit. It's the third-party audit. And your evidence is your conclusion at the end that is supported, right? So that's another aspect which makes your verbal data credible and authentic.